Right, so yeah, thanks for having me. First question, who is English speaking or German pure? Because then we may switch. English speaking? Okay, then we keep it English. It couldn't have been a better pre-speaker, to be fairly honest, because most of the topics somehow chip into what we try to achieve with Vito Ventures. Don't wonder why it's now V Squared Ventures. We're just raising our next fund, and this implicates that it's a new investment or a new fund structure, nevertheless with the same focus. So why deep tech? Let's start with what is deep tech according to what we believe it is. And you kind of looked in somehow in the past to figure out how to find an investment spot not all the other VCs find, and that pretty much will result in returns for or predominant returns for our LP base. So the whole differentiator from our perspective is it's technologies and disruptive solutions built around unique, protected, or hard to reproduce technologies or scientific advantages. They have the impact to create entire new markets and disrupt existing industries. Sounds good so far. I guess most of the VC companies are looking into targets who somehow fit to this. And we're trying to look a lot more into the IP and the tech savviness a company has versus than the business model which comes on top. So why looking to the past before we look in the future to this? If you look into Europe, and as we are in Germany today, look at German examples of entrepreneurs back then who founded their companies based on exactly those classifications on our investment thesis. So if you look at Werner von Siemens or Gottfried Daimler or even Oscar von Miller, they all started somehow as engineers working on big problems, not only focusing on hey, how to build a billion-dollar company out of this, but actually to create something that is not existing yet and that actually will disrupt everything. Werner von Siemens, by the way, funny quote on this, if you Google those guys and read the Wikipedia summaries to this, there's always the same sentence in it. They started in a garage and built a massive company. So normally we are looking into the Silicon Valley when we hear about this, but we don't have to do so, because if history repeats, here are the protagonists who already did what a lot of the founders that we see here and across Europe are trying to achieve. Some more to mention to actually, this list is endless in Germany and it is endless in Europe, from the fundamental technologies that have been invented from young entrepreneurs to that stage that built companies and changed whole industries. Before we continue to start to how we're going to do that as a fund and what we're looking into in founders and why we believe that deep tech is Europe's biggest chance, if you see those innovation cycles, a lot of consultants and others actually put on their slides, you always see two main stages, which is an installation phase and a deployment phase. Installation phase is where technology develops, where you actually have to do research, where you have to get funding in it, where you have to build IP, and then you end up somehow in a deployment phase where all this is getting applied across industries on a massive scale. So the last one we are right now, crypto and distributed ledger technologies. I know that we had somehow a little crypto winter already a couple of months ago as the big hype with ICOs somehow imploded. But here's a question for the audience. With the knowledge you have today, would you have invested in the internet as an infrastructure back then? Who would have? One, two? Some more? Okay, so same impact we believe that crypto and DLT will have on the way we communicate, we consume stuff in the future. This may have even a bigger impact on us as human mankind than the internet has. Hard to imagine now, but that was back then the same scenario. As a kind of a bigger investment hypothesis, we thought on, which technologies have the potential to create whole new industries or disrupt existing industries to its core. And the question is, again, and I'm very happy to have the pre-speaker right now, is which industry will give 20% of the population actually wages and a job they actually want to work for in 20 or 30 years' time? Is it still going to be the automotive industry? If you look at what happens with e-mobility, we don't believe so. And it's probably one of those 6 topics that we took for our investment focus, and it's a plenty more where you could apply this to. It's pharma, it's medtech in general, it's chemistry, it's actually the whole range where Europe or Germany, for this perspective especially, is better than a lot of other industry nations. So instead of focusing on what we already missed, a lot of the consumer stuff that was funded in the US, a lot of and from China, why not actually going back and looking straightly in what we are really good in? And there is a huge difference to now. If you look into B2B tech, you not necessarily have to go to the US or China to test or scale your company, because the markets who need this are all at your doorstep. So trying to test with the industry, disrupt them or serve them to actually survive the industrial revolution that is happening right now is something that is possible at the doorstep. So coming to the point where we say why we think deep tech is the biggest chance for Europe especially. If you just crunching stats on what is in place that could enable this, it's always coming down to talent, innovation and money, and markets. And if you take those comparisons, for example, Europe has 1 million more developers than the US. It's 6 of the world's top 10 computer science universities are based in Europe. The country with the most absolvees of MINT studies is in Germany. So we are all taking this into account at Vito Ventures and V Squared Ventures to say, what happens if we give those founders access to markets, obviously capital, and now how to build a company? Here and then, it's still the myth that developers or scientists are not necessarily the best entrepreneurs when it comes of leading and building teams and building up an operation where you can create a huge company. And that's probably true for now. Nevertheless, I guess the fact is you could teach a rocket engineer a business metrics, but it's pretty hard to teach somebody who studied economics to be a rocket engineer. So from that logic, we think by providing capital and the knowledge how to build a company, they can actually go out and build their dreams and their visions, because they're all around those universities and research hubs that exist in Europe and Germany. Same as for innovation, so I took that up front. And now it comes to markets. I think the pressure on innovation for big corporates and incumbents is bigger than ever. And for now, they're always trying to hedge that risk by doing some innovation and work together with startups and all that. But it's all on serving their survival, or somehow push their survival a bit more into the future. We believe if you give those scientists, developers, founders in those really deep tech topics the capital, they will not end up in R&D facilities in those big companies like Bosch or Siemens, to just name 2. But they will build their own dreams. What will happen on talent and R&D at those companies? The best talents are not in there anymore, but building their own companies. So if they want to have the best talent and best technologies back into their companies, they have to buy them. Otherwise, they will not survive the next innovation cycle. So everybody is missing out the exit market in Europe and Germany, very true. But that's a way how to change it, just by giving the right people money and access to markets. Have I forgot anything? No, not so far. The point is to keep it as short as possible. Is more for Berlin shaped a lot for the whole industry and the whole mindset that founding is something good and something positive and something with value. And Berlin was always very strong in doing that, first of all, for B2C and commerce markets, just due to the fact that Rocket helped a lot on educating those people and taking on those business model innovations. But looking at China and US right now, what happens, we always make the same mistake right now, over and over again, to back the right companies on first-hand side when it comes to B2C topics, and then other make the big funding rounds, like at Auto 1 or Go Euro. But right now, we have a chance to actually really substantially make a new fundament for our industry as it exists and what we are specialists in Germany, which is all the electrical mechanics, engineering, automotive, aerospace, just to name a few. If we back those founders, we have to make sure that new funding comes in for them, not from the US and China for now, but from corporates, new funds, state grants, and all that. And to embrace that, we try to help and build that little piece with a VC fund focusing on B2B deep tech. Nevertheless, it will not work without other formats like conferences or seeing Daria here with 1E9, Denkfabrik community, which is trying to get all that stuff together to get an infrastructure where people who are building new industries can mingle together, find the right people to talk to, and the ones that are actually going to finance them. Thank you.
Thomas, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Are you having any questions? Wow. Oh, over there.
Hi, thanks. My name is Bastian, and I am doing an AI startup for airborne navigation. And I started out about 3 years in the United States, just because this is not, as you know, in the commercial space legal to fly drones around in metropolitan areas. Just about last year, Airbus was the first company that launched a project with the Aviation Authority of Singapore and finally got the permission to test something like that out in real-life conditions in a metropolitan area in Singapore. And my experience was whenever it came to a very complex technology as a startup in an area that would not be legal yet, it was almost impossible to get investor funding. Let alone to convince any VC or to even say, I know someone who works at Bosch, he could be a wonderful add-on in the team, but I don't have, obviously, anything to offer to him as long as I do not have an investor. Even in that constellation, it was not really a possible route. So is there anything that you plan to do to make this a more possible route for startups that are involved in like deep tech, and what are the plans that you have to do that? Thank you.
Yeah, very good question though. So just before the Heureka, I was at the BDI, Bund Deutsche Industrie, who are trying to do exactly that, actually finding funding and make a huge fund, for example, or actually advise the Bundesregierung and the industry to say what is necessary to enable exactly that. Is it sandbox corridors where you can actually check on something like this? And if you just ask me personally, and as representative of Vito Ventures, the more people start doing something like that and have to actually go away to the US or China to find the right infrastructure to do so, will get politics and industry to the table to change that, because it's a drain of technology and IP that is happening, obviously. And if one person is doing so, then nothing happens. If two, maybe not. But if it happens from all different actually angles, if it happens from entrepreneurs like you, if it happens from funds, if it happens from the industry, then you can actually get that movement going. And that's why I highlighted Daria with the 1E9 Denkfabrik. What they're trying to do is taking big deep tech topics like drone and make a magazine out of that. And then also make a scalable infrastructure, a community behind a paywall where you say, that's where people can actually mingle and share experience on how to actually do it. And then also make a conference where you get those people together. And I think we should talk after the Horeca. I don't know how big your funding is already. Nevertheless, it's I guess it's a differentiation to, will you going to be a founder or an entrepreneur? And will you find a way how you get funding to that point where it's such in the center stage that every fund will actually run to you and say, please take my money, under what conditions? And for the time being, we're trying to consolidate those interest groups, corporates, family offices, entrepreneurs in our fund to actually then provide access to markets and to influential people who could provide something like a sandbox corridor for your drone.
We have one question over there.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
We are in the mobility space, so we're currently doing the Startup Autobahn program funded by Porsche and Daimler. And my question to you, being based in Munich and having been around, I guess, the OEMs and automotives, what's your take on car sharing and or, I guess, shared electric mobility here in Germany, considering that we have such a strong background in that space when it comes to the actual hardware, so to speak?
So I think it's the only way how you, in the future, will have OEMs still existing. So I'm a true believer in car sharing or mobility sharing as it is. And I give you an excursus just to say, what happens if e-mobility kicks in as everybody is trying to get it into the market right now? Then a company like Porsche will get a hard time how to make money. Because for now, to pay 160,000 euros for a car is because of the engine and the whole car concept. But if the engine goes away, and it's a commodity, because all the batteries come from Taiwan and China, and all the technology how to get that on the road is also not from them. So that's a commodity. So the differentiator will be what? It's design, materials probably, but will it actually still be possible to sell a car for 160,000 bucks when all the other cars cost around 30,000 or 50,000? And from that point, to get an idea on how to make money in the future, they have to look into what will the customer do? Will they still buy cars, or will they don't want to own anything but just use the service? And then you have to react on it. So I guess as more shared mobility startups push in the markets, the more they have to react, and the more they actually have to acquire them on a certain stage, because they can't do it themselves right now. So, yeah.
Cool. Oh, one more over there.
Hello,
Hey.
my name is Simon. I work for Förderbar. Hello, Thomas. Good to see you.
Met you last week.
Yeah. I have a question. The deeper deep tech is, the harder it is for investors to measure them in case of risk management. So how can you manage to rate deep tech and innovation?
Yeah. So obviously, it's one of the KPIs is not necessarily installed apps or revenues, but it's more on. We always try to get an idea of, is a company able to create a fundamental different company and technology in 16 to 18 months' time? And let's take ESA Aerospace. It's a rocket company. They built kind of a European SpaceX, if you want so. And so we said, guys, are you able to actually 3D print the turbopump within 16 months and do a hot fire test on that? And that's the milestone. And if you achieve that, we are super sure we can get next funding. And then you have to actually look around, find industry experts who've done something like that before. In our case, it was a former SpaceX engineer. So we try to leverage the network to get an idea of, is it possible? Is it possible in a time frame where it still fits in our fund logics? And how big is the market that technology can impact? And obviously, I guess some of them will not come to a point where they can actually monetize on their product, and still they hedge the risk for to be a complete write-off, because they're not going to sell just an app, but massive IP and a very unique team. So that's kind of our approach, how to... Okay. Our approach to hedge risk and to assess technologies.
Right. All right, Thomas, thank you so much.
Thanks
It
a lot
was
for having
really
me.
interesting. Hope to see you later.
See you later. Thanks a lot.